Okay, this is sort of review, but this is an important time to consider this because it's sort of how we measure. Remember when I talked about in the earlier videos, measuring units of consciousness can also be translated as a measurement in learning, which can also be translated and quantified as speed, speed of the energy, speed of the electrons, which can also be measured in the amount of light that we experience, not only in one planet ship, but throughout what? A galaxy. Okay, so what we're measuring in the cosmos is the speed of the universe that is expanding and contracting or gaining light and losing light. Okay, so then you begin to understand in the lower dimensions, when we call it lower creation, and why there's a classroom in place is to do what? Produce more units of consciousness that have learned how to get their speed up, which is the spin of the Merkaba. Now, another way to translate this, because I was just shown a map by a channel called the Florida Maquis, who was showing, for example, red states, blue states. So if you're familiar with magnetic poles of the planet, right? North Pole, South Pole, blue light, red light. What do you get when you mix red with blue? Purple. Okay. And then you have the sine wave, which runs around the equator. Sine wave. A sine wave. That's your EKG sine wave. Using potassium and sodium ions to kickstart a magneto, fires a battery. The potassium and sodium ions is the battery. The kickstarts the Q or ST, which is the electrical wave of your heart. Okay, it spins the light wheel. Now you're able to pull more oxygen that have a relationship with what? Electrons. With salt. Saltwater biology. Now you can spin that Merkaba like crazy. So when you learn how to become a light producer running high-speed electrons, what happens? You've learned how to become a self-sustaining unit, and you're running at high speed. That means you become a powerhouse in the cosmos, keep the speed up in the galaxy and the speed up in the universe, right? Now you're with us. So that's the purpose of a classroom, isn't it? So all the lessons and the things that I presented here make that pretty simple, because you can see that in nature. Nature is showing you how energy works. And you can see that if you spend enough time in nature, how the balance between everything that is in nature. It's one of the reasons why, for example, an island is a great laboratory for understanding the nature of how frequencies and different species coexist together in an energetic environment from which they're using that energy to sustain themselves and reproduce themselves. Okay? Example. If you take the natural way in which magma comes up from the ocean, produced through analog consciousness, okay, then the way in which light hits the crystal from which it's produced, and the frequencies that are produced therein, then you'll begin to realize when you are in observer mode how the different flora and the fauna have a shared relationship with each other in that electromagnetic pulsed energy field. So, for example, you can measure the harmony and the balance between everything that is aware of itself, that is using the energy in its ecosystem to maintain what it can reproduce over time. And we can measure the lifespan of the frequencies and the energetic relationships that everything has in that natural environment, which means the species that are native to that island, okay, without any other species being introduced into that ecosystem, becomes a model lab. Or if you will, beings from other star systems come and look at one island and see how consciousness has produced basalt rock upon which you see life grow on that rock, and you can begin to see how life will begin to thrive on that rock, in this case the big island, and you can see how the different frequencies that are represented by the different species that are there are managing the way in which all those energies that are interacting with each other as self-aware units of consciousness are able to maintain its harmony and its balance over a given period of time. Because the energy and the way that the energy is used over geo-space-time is maintaining its harmony. And one of the ways in which you can measure that is if you have one species, for example, that is feeding on other forms of energy. For instance, one particular species, like let's say, for example, a mammal is a plant eater. Like when you see bears in a forest, one of the ways in which you can see what it is they feed on is by the berries in their poop. Okay, bears love berries. Okay, they're natural plant eaters. Okay, so that means that nature is always going to produce an enormous amount of berries during certain times of the year, which means that bear, which are heart-based mammals, which means its mother, for anybody that has ever watched a mama bear fiercely defend and protect, that's what she gives life to, which is what love is. Okay, so they're able to maintain themselves in that particular habitat in which bears reproduce themselves, can pretty much go on forever because Mother Earth will provide the natural living spirit and water and the carbon cycle and the water cycle upon which they will reproduce themselves over a given period of time because they're not predators. Okay? So those that study anthropology and archaeology and the fossil record know that the species in any given energetic environment that is the most predatory, that is seeking to acquire energy as it goes, pillage and plunder are the first ones to go extinct. And why is that? Because it doesn't know how to take only the amount of energy that it needs to sustain itself, in which it allows the other energy that is there for others that are there to draw from that energy to maintain what it is they reproduce, which is what they are aware of, which is themselves. That means that the higher creative intelligence in the cosmos is seeking to maintain the peace, the harmony, and the balance in which it can experience the diversity of all these different species upon which they can live in peace, harmony, and balance together because their level of intelligence knows how to live in peace, harmony, and balance within an electromagnetic energy field. That's a level of its learning, how energy works. Because the more it's able to maintain its state of peace and harmony and balance, the more of the universe it gets to experience in the infinite way in which that life unfolds throughout all the hyperdimensional realms. Which means it's unlimited, because our creative imagination upon which we're giving love to create life and thus be in a bidirectional mirror, a reflection of who we are, of what it is we create with our imagination, we know that goes on forever. Because we're always giving energy away as the energy givers of the cosmos, from which source is automatically giving away free energy so that it can maintain what it's aware of, so that it knows it goes on forever. Because that which is an energy giver will always be getting back more of what it is to go on forever. For all species to thrive. When you've acknowledged that you have become what that is, then you know what you are. You are the life force energy upon which the fountain of youth is based. You are forever young because your spirit is forever giving away energy, which means you're eternal, which is eternal life, which is eternal spirit, which is eternal unconditional love. That means we learned how energy works. That's the purpose of a classroom, is to learn how light works. So one of the things I was thinking about was in the Florida Marquis maps, because I'm old enough that I can remember what I call the shift in the harmony and the balance. So I saw where Nevada and Oregon and Washington were blue states. Now, having lived in Oregon going back to the early 1970s, most of the people that lived in Oregon back then lived in agriculture and lived off the timber industry, which means most of those people had a connection to the land from which they derived their source of energy and income. So they lived in greater harmony with it because they realized that their source of income and well-being was dependent on what? Nature. So what you began to see over a period of time is a large migration of people who came from where? California. California was one of the largest parasitic factories in America to breed more parasitic units of consciousness. And how did they do that? Well, that's pretty simple. All you have to do is look at all what we call the entitlement programs, which essentially means, listen, you don't have to use your state of learning on how to go faster and use your creative imagination to create your own reality and follow your own passion, where you become your own self-sustaining copper top battery, okay, or gold battery, where you are producing an enormous amount of light, which means wherever you go, you're attracting more of what you are, which means you are naturally experiencing that which you have passion for. And that will allow you to sustain yourself and be in a state of love and joy no matter where you go. Instead, what you began to realize, because I experienced this over time from 1950 to 1990, was a reproduction of more units of consciousness that were lower density consciousness, and as a result of that, they were feeding on energy on others that were running the light, which means now we had more energy consumers instead of energy producers. And in nature, what happens? That means there are more beings that migrated from the state of California to the state of Oregon that were feeding on everybody else's energy. That's what turned it into a blue state, a la Portland, Oregon. Because traditionally, if you go back and look at the polling data from the state of Oregon in the 1950s and 60s, you would have never found it to be Democrat or blue. So they flipped the state to be parasitic, demonic. Okay. So one of the demonic factories was San Francisco. Okay, that's Pelosi's district. And then, of course, you had Garcetti, Los Angeles, Governor Brown, Pat Brown, and all you have to do is look at the families that founded, if you will, on behalf of the Vatican, okay, all of the missions that go from Mission San Diego, Mission San Gabriel, okay, Mission San Juan Capistrano, and then you go up into San Luis Rey, or is it Mission Monterey, the mission systems that the Catholic Church put into California, and then it had the Spanish flag, right? Then it became the governor of Mexico, not the governor of Mexico, the governor of California. The first capital city of California was Monterey, Mission Monterey. And then it was San Francisco, and then it became Sacramento. So if you study the political history of the state of California and manifest destiny, it's the same conquerors, the same parasites, okay? So they move through different areas. That's why you had all the violence and all the stuff up in Portland, okay? Which if you would have asked most of the old-timers around here that have been in the state of Oregon forever, just can't believe what happened to their state, okay? That it was basically overrun, because I can walk around Medford here and I can see that at least most of the faces that I see around here, I know where they came from. They came from California. Okay, so I know what California became, right? All the freebies, all the welfare office and everything else. Now, the flip side of that naturally is that, hey, we're the good guys. Listen, we want you to be all taken care of. Okay, so when you come to us, don't worry about it. We'll cut you a check, we'll give you food stamps and all the rest of this. So this is how they invert people's thinking. What they don't realize is that this is a parasite, getting you to mimic a parasite in the mirror. Because where do you think that comes from? Producers of energy. So what they want to do is they want to feed off the producers, because those that are saying, hey, come to us, we'll give you what it is you need so that you don't have to do much. And now that you're coming to us, you're in dependence mode. Now that you're in dependence mode, and your Merkaba is spinning at a slower rate of speed because you haven't learned to get your energy up to be an energy producer in the cosmos, then you're always going to be dependent on us because we're bigger parasites. Because guess where we get our energy from to give it to you? The energy producers. So we're going to drain all the energy out of the energy producers in order to give it to you so you can feed on them too. That'll reduce the speed of the electrons in the planet. That'll reduce the amount of light across the planet. Now everybody on the planet is held to a lower density of consciousness because now everybody's living in fear of losing energy. I need more money. That's how bad it got. So they had to define in our minds that the way that the cosmos works is defined and translated and thus experienced through parasitic consciousness by translating it through money and things. And so what becomes really, really bad in all this is that when we all look at each other and judge each other by that standard, which means in order for you to be accepted as one of them, you have to show that you're a big-ass parasite by how much stuff you have, how many yachts you have, how many houses you have. Because if you're not going to be one of us, something's wrong with you, which is why all the mask wearers look at the ones that don't. How dare you not wear a mask? How dare you not acquire all this energy off the energy producers to suck from the planet all of its electrons and light? So they programmed units of consciousness to believe that the cosmos that they lived in, otherwise it's going to live in fear of losing energy, which means in order to do that, you got to feed on others in order to sustain yourself. That's called inverted. That's why it's universe killers. So that's why for me, when I do the translation, those that are running around with masks on, live in a state of fear because they're obeying their master, don't even understand that their state of consciousness represents a universe killer. What does the girl on the planet do with all these universe killers that didn't learn through her how energy works and instead learned how, through a parasite, how to mimic a parasite? That's why they did everything that they did, knowing the timeline. And here's something about timelines. When we talk about potential possibilities in a looking glass, right? Okay, there are ways to actually know what the future actually is, except that their artificial intelligence supercomputers doesn't have the capacity to do that, but the girl on the planet does. Okay? And I know that because I'm with her. Okay? Which essentially means it's real simple. It's a math calculation. If you have, I went back to the 100 units of consciousness. If the 100 units of consciousness are being influenced by something that is presented to them, that they thus are giving energy to experience and don't know the difference, that, hey, if I walk away from that, I'm not going to experience what that lower energy represents, and instead I'm going to go be out in nature, which represents something higher on the food chain, then I'm not going to experience what's been presented to me on YouTube. Instead, I'm going to be experiencing something that she's showing me. And that will automatically raise your energy up, won't it? I call that duh. Okay? How can you not know that? Because they don't know that. Because they were programmed to be disconnected from that. Okay? That's why they wanted everybody out of nature. And to put them all together into boxes, into heavier matter density consciousness together. That's why cities are magnets for parasites. Because they know that as long as there's more beings that are around there that have things, they can always come up to you and say, you got a cigarette, you got any money, you got any food, you got something. It's just like the other day, I felt like walking out to somebody and I say, listen, If I gave you a sleeping bag and a buck knife and told you, guess what? Go up in those mountains up there. Could you survive up there for a week on your own, just by yourself? Would you know how to do that in nature? How many people out of a city of 50,000 people do you think could go do that? How much fear would they live in to be in living nature? That's a measurement, isn't it? See how it works? That goes back 100 years, doesn't it? That's when they split the tribes up, put them in POW camps, and then over the last 40 years wanted to move everybody off the land and into the cities. And why that? Kill zones. All the Wi-Fi and all the high G stuff. That's your COVID stuff. Okay? Coagulate the blood. That was the whole thing of the ventilators. Remember? All the evidence is there. All the data we collected is all there. They wanted to kill off 90% of everybody on the planet, leave 2% in order to use that for DNA. Okay? So that's why I always figured, if you're not with nature, not with the girl on the planet, how do you really know what's going on? If you're getting all your information off of YouTube, okay, and all these carnival barkers, okay, that don't live in nature, don't have a spiritual relationship with the girl on the planet, then tell me how the hell do they think they even know what the hell's going on, because this is her classroom. She is the biggest state of consciousness that's in this planet. So if you want to know what's going on, I suggest that people have a communication relationship with her. Okay? Because this is her classroom. That's the girl I communicate with. Because I love to be with her. She's a girl who heals me. So this is sort of how the political thing shakes down. North Pole, South Pole. Harmony and balance between the poles, which is harmony and balance in Mother Earth. That's what the poles mean. Poles, voting poles, the magnetic poles, blue light, red light, together that are in harmony, burning at a high rate of speed. When that Merkaba is running at a high rate of speed, produces what? Indigo. Now you're with her, running at a high speed. Punch your ticket to fifth density consciousness. Higher hyperdimensional realms running at hyperspeed with a hyperspeed Merkaba. It's all in front of all of us. The radio set, the TV set, Cosmopolitan. That's what it meant. They believed that in order for them to present who they are to everybody else, they had to represent what it is that a carnival barker was showing them that they were going to be judged by. And therefore, their life and the lives of others was going to be judged through the lens of a carnival barker, which is where the term snake oil salesman came from, which were known as your snake worshipers. The forked tongue, the either or, the love and the fear, the paradox, the split in the timeline. The one is in love with itself because it loves the energy that it loves to give away for free. And the fear of being in what love is as a result of, that's too powerful energy, oh my God. Which one do you think created the cosmos with? Which energy do you think the source from which all divine living light comes from to imagine everything that is possible to experience? Those are the basic, most fundamental questions that children ask, and it's why I love to work with children, because they are so excited to learn. And that's what they had to cut off. They had to cut off the passion that adults had when they were children to want to learn and ask questions to learn from. when you're seeking to find the answers to the most fundamental questions in the cosmos, to how the cosmos works so we can be a part of everything that is, those questions get answered through spirit, through the girl on the planet.